Well, hi there, I'm Jen, and this is the Roving Crafters, and I'm doing some spinning, and I think I'm going to tell a few tales and maybe do a little bit of instructional videos. I'm going to make this like a little hybrid. I'm today. Spinning. I have this roving that I just bought last weekend, and it's been burning a hole in my stash. Starting with the yellow section, then I've got a little bit of dark orangey bit, and it'll end with some purple. Spinning it up nice and thick. So I've got about this much of it done, and I'm using my large whirl. I've got a fair amount of take up on the wheel, and as you can tell, spinning it. And because I'm doing this all thick and quick and rough and tumble like, I bet you I get through this spinning part pretty quick. I'm still spinning, doing pretty good, making pretty good progress. It's been about a little more than 5 minutes since I got started. And here's how we look. And I'm feeling pretty good about it. I'm also all settled in for the long haul. So I've got all of my extra supplies. When you spin, you obviously have to have your fiber, you have to have your wheel, but you have to have more than that. You have to have a nice cup of coffee ready. Oh no, look, we're almost low. I'm gonna have to take a break soon and get more of that. Yeah, you gotta have plenty of coffee if you want to make spinning progress. The other thing is you gotta have cowgirl boots on. That's pretty necessary. And if you're spinning in this apartment, you have to have some of this aerosol spray, otherwise known as the anti-feline overlord device. Anti-feline overlord device. Yeah, if you want to get any uninterrupted, unmolested spinning done, you better have a can of this handy. So I've been spinning on this for about 15 minutes or so. It's going pretty good. I'm coming to the end of the yellow section on the braid of hand-painted roving. I figure I'll start in on my first little tail. I have a couple of tails ready, and they're all about the Texas Rangers. I've been asked a couple of times to talk about the Texas Rangers, even though it has absolutely nothing to do with yarn, of course. Well, almost nothing. The Texas Rangers are something like the second oldest law enforcement agency in the United States, and they were formed when Texas wasn't part of the United States. Little background. Yeah, the Texas Rangers were a very rough bunch. Today, you could not have Texas Rangers doing what Texas Rangers did back in the day, but it was a different world back then. And the world was, Texas had just fought its War of Independence from Mexico, and it was massively in debt because wars are expensive. Couldn't afford basically anything, and was running the government, the new Texas government, on a shoestring. One of the things that they could not afford was an army. And back in the day, the only thing that could protect a frontier town, cattlemen all across the West, was an army. And Texas didn't have one, couldn't afford one, couldn't raise one. So, they half-assed it with the Texas Rangers. Now, the Texas Rangers were recruited to hunt down bandits and criminals and gangs and protect the town. And the Texas Rangers had to be about as tough and lawless as the criminals they were chasing. Let's face it, they were manhunters. But they were unfunded, practically unsupplied, very disorganized, and surprisingly effective, which of course is one of the things that Texas is just so freaking proud of, is that in spite of all of it, Texas Rangers have always managed to get the job done. One of the famous and beloved stories that come out of the days of Texas Rangers was there was a heavyweight prize championship fight, and it was all set up to go and organized to happen in Dallas, I think. And it had been organized by Judge Roy Bean, otherwise known as the hanging judge. And of course, the fight was completely illegal. Judge Roy Bean liked to do pretty much wherever he wanted, whether it was legal or illegal. And he was judged back in Langtry, which is all the way at the other end of Texas, down by the Mexican border. But there's more people in Dallas. That's where he's planned his fight. So they're expecting, the powers that be are expecting this to get awfully rowdy and rambunctious. And they're expecting riots. So they call the Texas Rangers, and Texas Rangers send a ranger. And he's met by the mayor as he gets off of the train at the train station in Dallas. And the mayor is, understandably underwhelmed and wants to know, where's everybody else? What do you mean they only sent you? And the ranger looks at him and says, one riot, one ranger. Now, of course, that was not the case. Rangers had a history of kind of like telling tales and screwing with each other. They were practical jokers. And there were other Rangers that showed up by other means of transportation. And in fact, the Texas Rangers flooded Dallas with law enforcement, vigilante ranger types. And they didn't have the fight in Dallas. But, and then after, Judge Roy being the kind of guy who was used to getting whatever he wanted, he reorganized the fight. And it did happen. It just had to happen in Mexico, right across the river. Basically right across from Langtry, his hometown, on the Mexican side. That's where they had that illegal heavyweight championship fight. One riot, one ranger. And I believe that phrase, whether it actually happened or not, everybody loves it, and they carved it into a plaque. One of the many memorials to the Texas Rangers. That is their iconic phrase. We're a little ways into that dark orange, reddish orange section on the roving. It's looking pretty good, don't you think? And it's going quite fast because, of course, I'm spinning this with a fairly low twist, nice and thick and fast. So I mentioned before that the Texas Rangers were big practical jokers. You have to understand that in the early days, like in the late 1800s, when you were a Texas Ranger, basically the only thing that they gave you was the opportunity to get shot. They wanted men to sign up for almost no pay, to bring their own equipment. There was no uniforms or anything. Their own weapons. And they had to supply their own horses. They were going to give them very little food and keep them out in camp, marching through wilds of West Texas, hunting down criminals. They were manhunters. And they had to do it on a shoestring. So one of the common practices was to lie to the new Texas Ranger recruit or the potential recruits and tell them that they get all sorts of free stuff when they sign up. And one of the most common things that these recruits were promised was free socks. Now you have to understand, back in the day, socks were knitted. They had to be all knitted. And in Texas, I don't think they had many machine knitted socks. They were knitted by hand, and I'm sure socks were very hard to come by. So they would tell the recruit, you sign up to Texas Rangers and you get free socks. But not right now. You get them from your company commander. You get them after you've joined and collected up your meager possessions and ridden all the way out to camp. So there's more than one written up little record of the old veterans sitting back in the bushes and laughing their butts off when the newbies show up for duty and ask for their free socks. But it wasn't all men in those camps. There's plenty of stories of the very tough Texas Ranger wife who lives in the camp with her husband and all the rest of the men. And we can only imagine how rough these camps would have been. Lots of gambling, lots of drinking, lots of young, probably largely uneducated men who were doing a violent job for no pay and risking their lives every day. I'm sure it was a rough place. There's this one, her name was Mrs. Roberts, and she was the wife of a certain Captain Roberts. And she, at least in one instance, played a practical joke of her own. Some mail came in for her husband while he was out on patrol, and patrols lasted several days. Well, one of the letters was addressed from Austin. And usually, when a Texas Ranger company commander got a letter from the capital, it meant they were laying men off. They had cut the budget again, and they were going to send men home. So, the company wanted old Mrs. Roberts to open that letter and read it, which she didn't do, of course, but she told them that she had. And that she told them that yes, they were right, there were layoffs happening, and that the capital had decided to lay off every man. I think it was every man under the height of 5'10" was going to get laid off. And they believed her and started measuring. They started trying to come up with ways to measure each other, because it's not like they had measuring tapes out there. They're trying to figure out who was under 5'10" and who was losing their job and who was getting sent home and who was staying. And that kept them occupied until Captain Roberts came back from patrol and opened his mail and told them, she's lying to you. No, that's not what it says at all. Probably said that, guess what, you're not getting your food ration for the next 2 months. It's probably something like that. But it didn't tell them that all the short men were getting laid off. That was not the letter. And Mrs. Roberts has a little notation in history saying that they forgave me and took it all as a very good joke. Ha ha ha. Yeah. So Texas Rangers and their wives were known for telling lies. Hey, it's a Texas tradition to tell lies. I'm still at it, and this is where I am on the bobbin. This is where I am. This is how much I have left to go. I think I've been at this for about 40 minutes or so, and I'm ready to tell you another story, another Texas story. It was a very famous Texan, a famous outlaw Texan, and I think his name is John Wesley Hardin. And he was a bad guy. He murdered his first victim. He was something like 14, 15. He stabbed one of his schoolmates to death. Got away with it. Probably because his family bought everybody off. Or because, boys will be boys and nobody cares if you stab one of them. But a year later, he followed that up by shooting a black man to death in the neighboring county. And that people cared about because, of course, even though this was post-Civil War, and I'm not going to claim that there was all kinds of good racial feelings, competent men in Texas, where there weren't a lot of people to begin with, competent men were thin on the ground, and you don't be killing one of them. So after he killed his first grown man, he was an outlaw and had to go on the run. It's not real clear where he went and all the people he killed. Later on in his life, he admitted murdering 40 people. At one point, he was on the Chisholm Trail as a cowboy herding cows. He killed 7 people on that cow drive. He killed a former state police captain somewhere along the way. He killed Union soldiers that were out to get him, and he got away with it. In 1874, he killed a former Texas Ranger who was working as a deputy, some sort of county deputy, and an ex-ranger. And yeah, Hardin killed him. And that was a big mistake because that put the Texas Rangers on him because they weren't going to put up with you killing one of theirs, even in one of their retired Rangers. And the captain of the Texas Rangers was McNeely, and he sent his right-hand man after him, who was widely known as McNeely's Bulldog. I forget the man's real name. Armstrong. His name was John Armstrong. But now everyone called him McNeely's Bulldog. It took him 3 years to catch this guy. And he chased him out of Texas and all the way across the South and ended up catching him in Pensacola, Florida, on some train in Pensacola, Florida. they have a shootout. And it's Hardin and his gang outlaws and McNeely's bulldog and a few of his rangers, and they shoot each other up. And they probably shot up the whole frickin' train. Who knows what these people in Pensacola are thinking? Because history does make a notation that when the rangers boarded the train and Hardin saw him, he pulled out his gun and said, "Texas, by God." I don't really understand why he would have said that, but maybe to let everybody know that it was Texans who were shooting up this train. And some of the outlaws were killed. Hardin was not one of them. He was injured and unconscious, so they arrested him instead of killing him and hauled him back to Texas and put him on trial and convicted him and sentenced him to something like 25 years in prison. But here's the story of old Hardin. After serving 17 years in prison, he's pardoned by the Texas governor for some unstated reason. I'm sure it was money. And he gets out of prison and he goes to El Paso, where he becomes a lawman. Yeah, But like I said, competent men who can handle themselves with thin on the ground. So they make him a lawman. And he did that for a few years and ended up getting shot at some poker game and died. The end. The lesson is, don't you be shooting up those Texas Rangers, because they will hunt you down, even if it takes 3 years, even if they have to cross the country. They'll get you. For Texas, by God. Look who's back. Hi there. Hey there, baby kitty. Okay, watch this. Okay, go on. Okay. Fred, thank you for visiting. Please leave. Please leave. Aw, this is so cute. Oh, this is so cute. All right, let's get that there. Now I'm still going, and I got a fresh cup of coffee, and I'm ready to finish out the last color section of this little braid. And here's how we're looking on the bobbin. And I reckon I got about one more story in me about the Texas Rangers. Now, things sure have changed and everything is very politically correct these days. Texas Rangers have been accused of and are often thought of as an all-white male law enforcement agency. And the truth is that the Texas Rangers were an all-convenient law enforcement agency. There were women named as special rangers as early as the 1920s. One of them was named as a guard for the governor's mansion, I think in the 40s. There have been, they would have called themselves Tejano, Texas Rangers, since the very beginning. They would have called themselves Tejano because they were Texans of Mexican origin. And all kinds of Native American Rangers. You could tell that there are Native American Rangers in the rolls by the number of mangled names in those old historic rolls, and men that were named Possum or Yellow Jacket or Iron Jacket. And of course, those were Indians. They were probably most likely Waco Indians or Apaches, because they recruited a lot of the local Indian tribes to help them fight the Comanches. But there is one Texas Ranger legend who certainly wasn't considered the typical white guy, and his name was Manuel Gonzalez. They called him El Lobo Solo, the lone wolf. He rode a black stallion that he named Tony. He wore 2 pistols, one on each hip, and of course it wasn't like in the movies. He wore them up high on his hip, not low slung. Real gunslingers. put their guns where they could get to them quickly. And he was a real gunslinger. He was one of the best. And he did it on behalf of the state of Texas rather than as a criminal. He was better than most criminals and said to be suspicious of any man who didn't have calluses on his hands. Because if you didn't have calluses on your hands, you weren't working for a living. And if you weren't working for a living, how were you getting your money? So he was sent to, in the 30s, when Texas was going through its oil boom. That part of Texas was some of the most wild country in the history of the United States. I mean, there were towns that were under martial law. The town of Kilgore, and this is in the middle of the Depression, discovered big reserve of oil, and its population went from 700 to 10,000 in 2 weeks. Can you imagine the crime? I don't think we can. I don't think we can imagine what that must have been like. So the Texas Rangers send a ranger out to Kilgore. They send the lone wolf. They send Manuel. And he rides into town. And according to the stories, he shot 3 men on the first day. Now, it doesn't say that he killed them. It just says that he shot them. And he was well known for being a darn good shot and for shooting men in the leg as a warning. Supposedly, after a few weeks of raids and investigations and riding out to ranches, chasing bandits down and hunting down smugglers, I mean, he was not just the Texas Ranger, he was the judge and the jury. So he captured, and this is single-handedly, he worked these towns all by himself. He was the lone wolf. He captured 300 men and chained them all up, a big long steel chain, and marched them through the town of Kilgore as a warning to all other potential lawbreakers. And then, being a generous fellow, he offered them the chance to go, all 300 of these chained up men, he offered them the chance to go free. Told them he would unchain them and let them go, but they had to be out of town in 4 hours, and if he ever saw them again, he was going to shoot them on sight. And according to one biographer, most of them left town in 10 minutes. And one of the things that the lone wolf would do was when he arrested or killed a criminal, he would take their weapons. He would take their guns and their knives. If they had a club, he would take that too. One local news agency reported that he had shot something like 75 men. And the lone wolf was quoted as saying that's a gross exaggeration. But he would never tell anyone how many men he was shot. He just wouldn't say. When he passed away, they found about 580 guns and knives in his collection. These are 580 weapons that he had confiscated from bad guys throughout his career. They're like his trophies. Now, I don't think he shot all 580 of them, but does that tell you that he single-handedly backed down and disarmed almost 600 bad guys in his career? One guy. One short little guy. You know, he was described as having a scarred face, being softly spoken, have a bent trigger finger, and absolutely no sense of humor. He's one of the biggest legends in the history of the Texas Rangers. And just a quick little bit here. That's the end of it. There we go. 4 ounces, all spun up. I think that took me, let's see, just over 2 hours to get it all done with breaks. I think it went pretty quick. The yellow and the purple certainly went very quick, and that middle red was a little bit compacted. It was a little bit of a twist in it, and so it slowed me down some. Otherwise, I definitely would have gotten it done in under 2 hours. And I might have even finished if I hadn't had to go and refill for coffee and hit the little girl's room. But you know what? That just can't be helped. So I hope you enjoyed this little spinning session and some of the stories about the Texas Rangers. Until next time.